Welcome to the second part of a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, called The Youth Behind a COVID Vaccine. I have been talking to the three key people who are behind the production of CoronaVac, a COVID-19 vaccine produced by the Chinese company SinoVac Life Sciences. Joining me today are Wang Lin, Viral Vaccine R&D Director, Lian Xiaojuan, Deputy General Manager of Production, and Cui Guoliang, Deputy General Manager of Quality. And our conversation continues. How it is like, how does it feel to be working in this industry, in this factory, in this very special period of time where the coronavirus has been wreaking havoc around the world?
Our R&D team was engaged in the earliest stage of vaccine preclinical research. Therefore, to be honest, we had completed a large part of our work in the first half of 2020. From then on, many of our team members have gone back to their original posts to work on other things. And only a fraction of them are still working on further research of the COVID-19 vaccine. In fact, at that time, we drew some young core staff from other project units or teams to form the vaccine R&D task force. It was the same faith and passion about conquering the virus that drove us in our work.
So just now you mentioned the word young people. I want to know what's the average age of the members that were in your team?
I learned from our R&D center that the average age of our entire team is 29 years old.
Ms. Lian, what is the situation with your team?
25.9 years old.
And your team, Mr. Cui?
The average age is 26.
That's really amazing. Everybody is so young. How does it feel, to be working with these young people, and especially, for instance, when you're doing the R&D, you need very solid, scientific knowledge and training. How did you manage that?
It's true that our R&D team members are rather young because we don't have academicians or experts who can guide us, but we have our own system and our own experience. These young people also have their advantages as they are full of energy and dynamism. The combination of our existing experience and their can-do spirit is key to our R&D success in such a short time.
How long did it take altogether from when you started to tell yourself, okay, we are going to make a vaccine, till you have the thing to go into clinical trial?
We started the research in January 2020, including some preliminary investigation and collaboration with partners. By mid-April 2020, our vaccine was ready for the first clinical trials.
So altogether 3 months it took you. How does that feel to be working like that? I mean, normally, what would it take for a team to produce a vaccine for clinical trial?
This was really a rare experience for me because we had a race of life and death. There was the pandemic, plus the dire needs from everybody. Normally, in vaccine R&D, it would take at least 2 years to go from project initiation to clinical trials. But for the CoronaVac, it took us merely 3 months.
How is it possible?
As is famously said, time is like water in sponge. If you squeeze harder, there's always more. We really used the day as if it were a week or a month. The whole work schedule was regimented down to the hour or half hour. The work was very tightly scheduled, and of course, everyone was working very hard.
Are there any moments, any special moments that you can recall that reflect the kind of the state of of things when you were doing that research?
There was such moments. There was a young mother in our team. She had 2 sons. One is 4 years old and the other is 2 years old. She often needed to travel for her assignments, so she didn't go home for the entire 3 months. Because the work schedule was extremely tight, often it would be midnight by the time she finished her work. But her children kept waiting for her to have a video chat. I was pretty touched when I saw that.
You managed.
Yeah.
Do you feel proud?
Very proud.
Ms. Lian, how did it feel to be working under such pressure and under such responsibility?
状态是在持续中。
The hard work continues and the mission keeps upgrading itself. The very first phase, from 0 to 1, was a time when we harnessed all our strength and sacrificed time with our families in order to achieve our goal. It was normal for us because in March last year, when we started building the factory, we had to simultaneously build the production system and complete the verification of equipment together with the construction teams and manufacturers before production began.
是生产的工作，记得当时我们这边是一位爸爸。
I remember that there was a father in our team whose son happened to be born in the early days of workshop building. He only went to the hospital to accompany his wife for 2 days before returning to the construction site. At that stage, there was only preparation work involving construction teams and equipment manufacturers. We were very touched by his dedication. We told him that as the production had yet to roll, the work of communication with the contractors and manufacturers could be covered by his colleagues. But he said no. He wanted to be with us from the very beginning. Back then, our young team was very limited in number. Large-scale recruitment had not yet started.
So help us understand, you talk about from 0 to 1. On what level did you start, and on what level you have to be equipped in order to produce 6 million, more than 6 million doses of vaccines on a daily basis?
就是厂房只有一个外壳。
At the beginning, it was all empty inside the workshop. As we all know, the COVID-19 vaccine has to go through different production processes in a high biosafety environment. This workshop is different from other vaccine workshops in terms of construction because of more stringent requirements and higher biosafety risks. No matter how harsh the circumstances, we overcame the difficulties in order to have the workshop completed as soon as possible, so that the production staff can start the mass production of the vaccines in a clean environment as soon as possible.
产业化的工作。
How long did it last before you have an empty production hall till you were the first vaccine rolled off the production line?
2020年的3月底开始进行这个。
The construction of the workshop started at the end of March 2020, and then on the 18th of June, the first batch of cells entered in the bioreactor. The virus would be cultured in the cells only after passing joint biosafety inspections by the National Health Commission and relevant ministries. It was on August the 29th, 2020, after the viral growth and reproduction had been completed, the bulk of vaccine was produced through purification. Having gone through processes including bottling and packaging, the first vial of CoronaVac was born in mid-September.
第一瓶科尔来福诞生。
How did it feel to see that finally, after 6 months of hard work, you have the product in your hand?
当时真的是特别的激动。
I was extraordinarily excited. Apart from being proud of ourselves, it was more of a sense of mission. The mission to provide vaccines to eradicate COVID-19. This sense of mission supported and inspired us all along.
鼓舞着我们。
The most important part now comes to you after they produce the vaccines. It is crucially important that these vaccines are up to standard. What was your team like in the preparation up to the first bottle was produced, and how did you make sure that from the very first dose on, everything must be up to standard?
整个这个疫苗的生产啊，它不是
Vaccine production is much more than just the final product. It depends on large number of facilities, from the construction and engineering, personnel, systems building, environment testing, and so on, all of which need to be up to standard. Before the vaccine is produced, the workshop itself needs to pass all relevant inspection and verification. All raw materials, including auxiliary, must be verified and deemed qualified according to relevant standards. Finally, we can have the vaccine. After the product is produced under the watch of Ms. Lian's team, my team will be responsible for checking and confirming the quality control parameter of the entire production process is met. At the same time, we verify our inspection according to our registered standards and our internal control standards to ensure that the whole process meets our quality standards. Only after that, I will sign and release the product to the market.
How was it like for you to be working back then? Because time is very limited. There's a very big deadline. There's a race around the world. And nobody ever produced vaccines for coronavirus before.
I think two words can sum it up. One is urgency, and the other is responsibility. The quality control and management team is the last line of defense before the product enters the market. We have to be responsible for each and every dose that goes out. As we all know, this vaccine will be used on healthy people, and it's an injection, so its quality directly affects the safety of those inoculated. Under that circumstance, be it raw material, intermediate product, or finished product, we would inspect for release without delay. It didn't matter what time it was, be it 8 a.m., 10 p.m., 12 a.m., or 2 a.m. It could happen anytime around the clock. So our job was around the clock to ensure that we could roll out more vaccines that met the quality standards in the shortest time possible. That's the state we were in back then.
Speaking of that, the production is 24 hours non-stop, isn't it?
是的，是24。
It was 24/7, and it still is. Yes, the production goes on non-stop.
So you have to make sure you have to do the quality assurance approval 24 hours a day. You have 3 shifts.
We carry out our inspection work according to actual needs. Sometimes we work in 3 shifts, and sometimes we work in staggered shifts. The ultimate goal is to ensure that whenever materials arrive, we can inspect them without delay.
What do you do with the standard? Because nobody had before we didn't have, now we have products, but in the very beginning, how did you set up the standards?
Mr. Wang is in a good position to answer this question, but I can first share a few points. When we start to develop a vaccine, not only do we need to figure out the whole production process, but also develop the corresponding quality control parameters and testing methods, so that when mass production kicks off, we can evaluate whether or not product quality meets expectations and quality discrepancies between batches are within the allowed scope.
What is the percentage of qualified products of the production line?
So far, all of our samples were sent to the National Institute for Food and Drug Control for testing. For a vaccine to gain emergency use authorization in China, it has to meet several criteria. Apart from the requirement for facilities and GMP compliance, there has to be self-inspection reports provided by the company through the QC lab and reports by relevant national institutes. To date, we have a 100% pass rate on all product inspections. In other words, every vaccine we put on the market has been tested internally and by third-party national testing institutes.
And this include exported and domestic use vaccines? Yeah.
Yes, it's the same.
So, Ms. Wang, what about the standards? How did you develop, how was the standards for the quality developed in terms of R&D?
Actually, when we were developing the COVID-19 vaccine, we didn't treat it as something for emergency use and therefore lower the standards or cut corners. We treated it as a normal vaccine that can be used on infants and children. So from the very beginning of R&D, we set our bars according to the quality control and residue testing standards designed for our existing product, the EV71 vaccine, which is safe for infants and children.
Speaking of children, how come at this moment we only allow such vaccines to be inoculated on people aged 18 and above?
I think this is related to our national disease prevention and control strategy. Since the virus is well under control in China, we first administered the vaccine to high-risk groups and then adults who are more socially active. In fact, infants and children are less at risk. It's not that they don't need to be inoculated, but that they are not a priority group. From the perspective of vaccine safety, we conduct clinical trials in the same sequence, starting with adults, then the aged, the adolescents, and then infants, all of which are still in progress.
Many thanks to my special guests today. They are Wang Lin, Viral Vaccine R&D Director of SinoVac, Lian Xiaojuan, Deputy General Manager of Production, and Cui Guoliang, Deputy General Manager of Quality. You've been watching a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, called The Youth Behind a COVID Vaccine. Stay with us.
现在去我们的 QC 实验室。
好。QC 是指
质量控制。
质量控制。
简单说是相应的各种检验工作
现在这一层有多少人？
这一层有200人。对，
所有都是这个。
这一层整个全是给 QC 的，然后还有一个质量管理部门 QA 在另外一层。这是我们的。对。
好。
对，然后把这个头发往耳朵后面过一下就可以。
它都要放进去。
对，它主要是减少对
里面环境的一
些影响。OK。然后这样的话，兜里呢是我们的鞋套。这样我们套上鞋套以后，跨过这条黄线，我们就进入我们的 QC 实验室。
OK。黄线
对，
好，
迈过去。
谢谢。
现在是我们实验室一个开放式的一个走廊，那在走廊的2层呢，分布着我们的实验室，这是一个分子生物学的实验室。然后这边呢是我们一个内毒素检测。
都在忙着呢。
对，看实验，因为我们现在生产的批次特别多，所以每天都会很忙碌的在开展各种检测工作。这个呢是我们一个叫隔离器。里面看到那么多样品是在做无菌检验，
他们都要全身的都要防护起来，是吧？
他们的全身主要是防止对环境产生污染，然后但是相关的操作是在隔离器里来走的。
在隔离器。
对。
这是什么？消除人体静电？
这是一个静电，因为要进试剂室，它主要防止出现一些爆燃呀这些，防止你静电，然后放在这里头。对。然后完事以后，绿色这样就可以进去了。对，这是主要。
我看看我有没有静电呀？
每个人都会有的，每个人都会有。
我也有静电。
对，每个人都会有。然后这边就是一些精密仪器了，然后这是我们 TOC。在这儿可以看到，就是种有机碳，是检测水。在疫苗整个生产过程中，我们这个水是一个非常重要的一个公用介质。这是我们在整个 QC 实验区里面单个实验室最大的一个房间了。那开展各类的这种理化性的这种检测工作上面看到的各种这个瓶罐罐里面，是我们开展相关实验用到的一些试剂或者是试液。
他们这都要3班倒吗？
他们 QC 实验室现在基本上不用3班倒，我们一些集训区里面用。这里面的人员呢，但是我会更灵活的排班。保证我一天24小时之内随时有实验室是可以开展的。
他们这是在做什么呢？
这是把我们产品上的这个盖子去掉。你们是要做气密性是吗？对。这是按照咱们国家药典的要求我们每生产出来的产品要做气密性检测。气密性就是里面和外面到底是不是通透的。 它要进行一个按照实验方法来进行检测。上面那个铝盖，您可以看到那个橙色，就是我们这个产品的一个专属色。
专属色，
对对对对对对。整个实验室里面那个主要的工作人员的平均年龄也就是27岁左右。现在我们去我们的酶联免疫实验室啊，在走廊的另一侧。
酶联免疫实验室 ，ELISA。
对。
这里是什么功用呢？主要？
产品检测完了，那个抗原检测，一个有效性指标。因为我们一般在疫苗里面会把指标分为几类，安全性指标，比如说无菌呀、异常毒性呀、细菌内毒素。那这个抗原检测就是有效性指标，这个里面的有效成分是否按照我们标准来走的，就是在这个实验室。
怎么能看出来？怎么做呢？
在这样一块板上，首先我们进行包被，进行包被，2到8个月包被，然后包被完之后，这块板子上它就是这个板子它就有抗体了，然后我们再加上我们的就是抗原，进行一个抗原抗体的结合，然后再通过加上一些抗体、酶标抗体，通过一些显色剂、显色反应，然后来。因为最左边会加一些参嘧品来定量评估我们产品中抗原的含量。
它是一种体外的一种方式来检测里面的抗原含量，是否符合我的质量标准。
这也是抽检。
PP 都检定。
PP 都检。
对 PP 都会检定的。
在它装瓶之前。
装完瓶之后，装完瓶以后，我要在生产线上取样，
取样，
抽样原则过来，然后他们 QC，把这个检测出来，这个不仅我们企业队伍内部要检定，中检院国家机构它也会进行检测的。
那么那个箱子是干什么用的呢？
它是生化培养箱，进行样品的温浴。
要多长时间？
大概整个实验4个小时左右。
4个小时。那这要不停的24小时在持续了，还是？
我们根据生产安排，
它会记录它放入的这个相关的时间，然后记录整个实验时长，来进行一个确认。可以给老师看一下。
这个生化培养箱它是一个37度的，然后我们要给它一定的时间、一定的温度，让抗原抗体进行充分的结合。
好的，关上吧OK。
然后整个这个设备的温度都是自动控制的。就是
这个设备是国产的吗？还是进口的？
这是进口的。
进口的。那你们当时在就是完成这一套的时候，你们这些仪器都知道到哪儿去找，能够很快的把所有的需要的这些设备都找到，都安装好吗？
对，我们整体来做的时候，首先有一个整体的设计。我的实验室要建设成什么样的样子？我需要什么样的仪器设备？哪些仪器设备是国产的？哪些是国外的？我们都会分别就下订单。它是同步开展的，不是说等实验室完事了我才买它。
整个这个实验室花了多长时间配备完毕？
我们整个楼这个建设都是100多天，就是整个实验室就是100多天，
包括从这个房子
就是
装修，
从实验室的建设到相关的仪器设备配备到位，就是100多天的时间。这个主要得益于咱们国家整个完整的一个工业化体系的这么一个支撑，还有我们良好的这种施工设计单位、施工单位，所以呢才会来保证我们新冠疫苗这个检验实验室能够综合出来。
那你们这些进口的设备的话，它进来也要很快哦，在这个疫情的情况下。
它是这样子的，这些检验的这些设备本身在国内它有很多这种代理机构，它是有一定的存货的所以说这样的会比较快大部分的一些硬件都是我们国内就能完全保障。
那现在就是有一些就是疫苗的变种，据说科兴是对有一些新的毒株是唯一有效的，是这样吗？当时这个情况是怎么一个情况？
它是这样的，因为新冠病毒它本身是一个 RNA 病毒，然后在全球呢这个流行过程当中，它在进化它自己过程当中会发生一些变异。那它变异以后，那么已经研制出来的疫苗接种人体以后产生的这个抗体，对这个病毒还有没有这种交叉中和的作用？那是需要实践来去检验的。那仅就目前已有的这种流行的情况来说，我们产生这种给人体注射后产生的抗体还是有效的。我们呢是针对这些可能流行的这种现在变异的这些毒株呢，也在开展新的以它为毒种的这些疫苗的前期的一种研发工作。如果说将来的主要的流行株是这些毒株的话， 不排除我们将来疫苗还会有其他因为新毒株更换以后的疫苗。
那么现在这个疫苗对于已经出现的这种毒株，这些新的毒株有保护性吗？
根据目前我们在国外，因为在国外现在的流行相对来说比较严重一些，
对，
已有的数据显示，我们的疫苗接种人体以后，对目前发现的这些流行株是具有保护作用的。
都有，
对，
无论是在南非发现的，还是在英国发现的，都具有性，
都是有一定的保护作用的。但是呢，由于这个毒株本身是存在差异的，它在保护效率上会存在一定的差异。病毒学它变异上分为这个血清型的变异和基因型的变异。那目前这种变异呢，还主要集中在这种基因型角度来说。那所以现在这样的抗体或者叫抗体血清，对这个病毒呢是有一定的中和作用的，就像就刚才他做的实验一样，就把这个病毒给中和掉了。也就它不具有这种生物学讲的活性，它不会再去复制啊，这样的话。然后从而呢不会让人产生这个延伸性的这种疾病。
您当时这个实验是怎么做的？据说是把这个血清拿到巴西去做的这样的一个试验是吗？还是这个过程您熟悉吗？
其实我们在巴西有我们的合作方，实验合作方。那在巴西呢，本地也有相关的这种实验室。另外一行就是一些真实世界了。那我就是接种了疫苗的人，在这个流行病这个区域里面。那么他有没有得病或者有没有住院？那进行这些扩大后的这种临床的这种观察，来确认它是否有效。
世界卫生组织正在准备对中国的疫苗，包括科兴的疫苗，进行一个紧急使用的授权。现在是一种什么样的心情？
我们其实还是
有没有信心？
必须有信心的因为我们首先对我们的产品质量是有信心的，对我们整个生产管理是有信心的。对我们的整个国家在这种物资保障、整个支持运输方面，我们是非常有信心的。所以呢，如果通过了世卫的这个 EUIL 的话，那么我们可以为更多的国家、为更多的全球的百姓提供新冠疫苗，给他们提供抗击新冠病毒的这么一个保护的盾牌为他们的健康做出我们的这个贡献和支持。
好的，谢谢，
谢谢
祝你们成功，
谢谢。
Many thanks to you for having watched this edition of The Young People Behind China's Vaccines, a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Thanks for watching. You've got the point.